there's some questions about his size and, his style of play, because he's 6'2", maybe maybe 215 pounds.
Yeah.
And he has a tendency to run around maybe a little bit more often than he should. So there is a question about how he's going to be able to handle New York and, in the AFC East, hanging in the pocket consistently. But I think the tools are there. And he's another guy like Lance, who actually was a good high school basketball player.
Yes.
So I don't think it's a coincidence that these guys are 1-2 for me, because that feel on the basketball court has a tendency to transfer over to the quarterback position.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, because when I look at both of those players, I see a lot of like internal rhythm to their game. However you want to quantify that. With Wilson, it's kind of taking advantage of certain throwing windows from different angles, and I think people can see it and think it's very flashy. Other people who analyze film, I think, see it and they want him to kind of stick to the script a little bit more. It's kind of the debate between good and bad chaotic in terms of his overall process. Wilson, I view it more as good chaotic. I think this guy's a gamer. I think that there's little hesitation going back into his game, even before the results were fully there. I remember going back to 2019. I've got my notes up here. Let me get to them for one sec. But I was charting his Utah game, not charting, just taking notes. But there wasn't. I kept writing like no panic. Just in between the bulk of like couple sentence notes or write-ups that I would have on him, and I found it very interesting. Just how he did you see anything specifically from his jump from 2019 to 2020, like something that sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, just apparently he just worked his tail off in the off season. So this past off season, he put in a lot of work, obviously in the weight room, but also watching film, and just, he did a lot of throwing. So I think there was that natural progression in terms of him becoming more comfortable with all of his guys.
Yes.
And in 2019, when he played, like, I saw flashes of NFL potential, but it was he had issues. You know what? I think he became more accurate in 2020 somehow. And I think that's sort of what drove his meteoric rise. But the talent was there. It was just, he became more seasoned in 20.
I completely agree with that. He's a very interesting quarterback. I think he's somewhat of a Johnny Manziel Rodgers hybrid with another player that I can't fully describe, some sort of cross between those players, because he doesn't have the velocity on his throws as a Rodgers.
No, he doesn't.
But he's not as just out there of a maniac in terms of what Manziel was doing, even though Manziel had some high level talent. And he's a very interesting player. I think I would definitely, considering him playing the season, I think I'd want to take him at number 2 if I'm the Jets. But it's an interesting debate. Going up to Lawrence, who I have as 1, and you have as, I believe, quarterback 3. What do you see what do you see about Trevor Lawrence? Because when I watched his old tape, I think I liked him a little bit more than I watch him right now. And that's a question about, at some point, is there a complacency that sets in with a quarterback who's won so many games like Lawrence and was so highly regarded? Is there anything that you think's catching up, or has maybe stalled with his development, or are we overthinking it a little bit with him?
No, I don't think you're overthinking it. I actually had the same thoughts about the more I watched Lawrence, the more some of these small warts were exposed to me, as opposed to earlier on when it's like, oh, wow, he's, making these huge throws down the field as a freshman. But, like in terms of the system that he played in at Clemson, I actually had a similar issue with Watson when he was coming out of that same system. And I was just like, there's not a lot of diversity to the system. It's not highly creative. It's very, very repetitive with a lot of this stuff. So I think over time, he just became, accustomed so much to operating within that system. So that a lot of the finer mechanical things and, eye deception and also processing and anticipation ended up actually taking a back seat, I think. So that was an issue that I had with Lawrence in attempting to evaluate him is, because I didn't want to make the same mistake I made with Watson, because I had Watson, as my QB5 in 2017, obviously a mistake. But there's some things with, obviously Lawrence has high-end physical, ability. He's able to spin it as well as anybody in this class. He's got requisite arm strength. He can run, but there's some issues with him being consistently accurate and also being able to throw it touch. There were times when I saw that on his Clemson tape where I was like, wow, that does not look like Andrew Luck. That does not look like a generational prospect. And it seemed to happen, not over and over again, but I'd say a handful of times that had me questioning. So,
yeah. I think it's very interesting because I look back at, I think maybe it was 2019 Texas A&M. And then if you go back to 2018, you can tell he's in the game for Kelly Bryant when he first took over as a starter, and he is ripping balls. I mean, the adrenaline that guy had early on, I think 2018 Syracuse, and some of those games where I thought he didn't have as good of an arm until I went back and watched those and was like, no, he does. But he's just selective about when he rips it. There's a lot more to Lawrence. I'm not going to overthink it a ton just because of, I think, the perceived floor. But I don't think that this guy is off limits for players in this class being higher than him. That's the one thing I think I want to emphasize. And I think your work has definitely shed some light on as well, which I appreciate because you can tell, I think a lot of people, they hear something and it heavily influences them. And I had to do this a little bit with Tua last year, where in my mind, I understood that Tua, to me, had a little bit of Brett Favre. People are going to be like, what? In terms of how he relied on instincts to play the position. And if you can't play with instincts at any position, you're not the same player. And that's the whole question about it translate. Like, people, I think, thought Tua was a tiny bit smarter than he actually was. Whereas like a guy like Joe Burrow, and I'm not sure where you had some of these guys, but you see the volume of reps that Burrow had out of empty. And the scheme definitely helped him too, but I think Tua's was a little bit different based on like some of the RPOs that they were running. A lot of it was just reading one guy, but then he showed the plays of high level instincts, which made you say like, this is interesting, but it better translate. Because if not, it's not quite the same player, even though he might have this special trait. I'm interested in what you have to say on, we'll go to Felipe Franks next, because that was the guy who I personally hadn't watched a ton of. I wasn't really sure what to make of him. Obviously high level traits. But you're very high on Felipe Franks.
Yes. So I am high on him. And, I actually got into him later on in this process after I was done grinding all the top, 5 or 6 guys film. And I went into it not expecting much, he was at Florida, he got injured, then he had to transfer to Arkansas. But he really reminded me, almost of a Kirk Cousins in terms of like his ability to throw the football down the field, sort of his overall mechanics. And he's able to really manipulate the trajectory of his throws at an intuitive level, is how I call it. It's almost second nature for him to throw a touch or to take something off the football or to really fire something in there. So when I watched more and more of him, it's like, well, this guy's 6'6", he's athletic, he's big, he has a strong arm, he's got a lot of experience, and he looks like Kirk Cousins at times from the pocket. So I'm going, well, if that's the way I'm seeing him, there's got to be some NFL teams who feel the same or similar. And of course, Frank's is, he's not going to be an early round guy, but I think he's a guy who will be considered a steal, maybe in like the 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round range.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It was very interesting to see him high on your list. I definitely don't watch as many quarterbacks as you. Mine are basically whoever's brought to attention to me. Once I start seeing guys in the 1st round, like Kyle Trask, I got to watch him to make sure, all right, this isn't a 1st round quarterback. And then there's quarterbacks I'll just watch for the hell of it, and to kind of learn like what makes someone a valuable quarterback. How are they going to fit in different systems? The players, a couple more players I want to touch on, and then I actually want to. I'm not sure how much you've gotten to other players in the class, but I bet you've watched a couple of receivers. So I'm wondering what you think about some of those guys. I saw you posting about some of them earlier. Yeah. Fields and Jones. I had a strong debate between who I was going to put 4 and 5. I put Fields at 4 because of the high end traits, but I have some concerns about him. I like Jones, I think, a little bit more than you might, but I don't like. The thing with Jones is how his margin for error is just going to be small, and you're going to have to question with Jones how much was Sark, how much was Smith and Waddle, how much was that run game, and how much was the scheme dictating because his film is very good.
Yes.
But that's the thing. You have to separate out how much is you and how much is everyone else, because this offense was a machine.
Exactly. 100%. Yep. Yeah. So with Mac Jones is, I like the player. It's not that I don't like the player. It's everything you just said is exactly how I feel about it. It's like he threw for what, like 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions last year. He just looked, he looked almost like Joe Burrow did the year prior. But when you know about Sarkisian and you know how gifted of a schemer he is, and then you consider the outside talent that he had, and everything was highly defined, he's going to look damn good. And he can throw with touch. He can anticipate throw. So he has arm talent. It's just when things at the NFL level aren't exactly how they were for Mac Jones at Alabama, how is he going to react to that? And then, in terms of playing within the pocket late into the down, how he's going to move, how he's going to handle pressure, et cetera.
Yeah. I think it's a very valid point. I think it's interesting I think he needs Kyle more than Kyle might need him in that offense, which makes the Lance pick that much more. Like, I can't trade 3 1s for Mac Jones.
No.
And maybe we're wrong, and maybe he is the one player who can operate at the margins, even though all these other things are around him. And I think there is a little bit of a dude quality to Jones, even though he looks like he doesn't look like anything special, and just watching him physically, but there's something there. So I'm not fully writing him off. Fields is the guy that I think I watched his tape for probably like every night before I went to bed. I turned on Fields tape because I could not figure out this guy for the life of me.
So frustrating. Yeah.
So frustrating. And he's the one quarterback that I think you could talk about forever. I did a film evaluation of a safety he was playing against Indiana, where they're spinning their coverages. But and I think people kind of give him a pass on that game, but that game in isolation is rough. It's really rough. They're open seam shots that he's not hitting. He's not pulling the trigger. He's not holding the safety. You're like, what's going on? And I think below the surface, I have questions about him as a reactionary athlete. Am I crazy if I don't put him in my top 20 overall players in this class?
I could see the argument either way. No, you would not be crazy. I've actually gone back and forth with having him out of my top 20 or top 15 but with Fields, it's like there's these flashes of high-end talent. One of the things that I said about Fields was that he reminds me of like, a cross between Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, and even Cam Newton at times. It just came to me watching him one day. It's like, geez, well, he has the athletic instincts, a little bit of Kyler Murray in terms of setting up to throw and like his arm action at times and his whip. But then, also he has the slow release of like a Cam Newton, very deliberate. And then he can create a little bit like Russell Wilson and throw deep. So it's like he has talent, man. It's just like you said, the reactionary skills as an athlete are they just cause you to pause and be like, okay, why are you staring at this guy for 3 seconds? Why are you not seeing this route open up and able to throw with anticipation?
Yeah. Do you see anything mechanically with him? Because I have a hard time. I've done the whole slow down the tape and try to figure that stuff out. I think something about the turnover from when he's I don't know the terminology as well as you do, but in terms of like what I can see it, but I think you could better explain it.
Yeah. So from a motion perspective with Fields is he's a natural thrower. Like he has a natural, I would say like arm action is natural. He played the infield in baseball in high school. So he knows how to throw a football. It's just there's an extra lever on his delivery where it sort of has a tendency to become a little bit elongated and a little bit deliberate. And that can be an issue in the NFL.
Yeah. I think he's the hardest quarterback that I've had to rank recently.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I hate him and sometimes I'm like, you're an idiot if you drop him, like as far as you're thinking of dropping him. And so I'm going to try to find some common ground with him. He can throw the post. He can throw the boot action to the flat, up to 15 yards, I think. Some of the second reaction plays we talked about, but yeah, are there any quarterbacks that you also kind of want to talk about before we wrap it up with some receivers?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to touch on a couple of guys. The first one is Davis Mills, and then the second is Kellen Mond, and then there's a small school sleeper that we'll get to too. But with Davis Mills out of Stanford, only 11 career starts in college. Okay, like Trey Lance, mentally, this kid has it all, and that's why his stock seems to be rising in the NFL draft circles. Is because not only did he go to Stanford, but he's a very tough-minded kid. He's accurate. He's physically tough. I mean, he'll stand back there in the pocket and take shots and still deliver. He's not flinching. He's 6'3", 230, Davis Mills is. And there's a lot of times on tape where you see him make Matt Ryan type throws, like in terms of anticipation. But the question I had with Mills is his arm strength, because it looked like he almost had a noodle arm at times.
Yeah.
In his college tape. But he has a lot of the characteristics that coaches love out of their quarterbacks. So that's why I think he's an interesting guy to monitor. And then with Kellen Mond out of A&M, he's another guy who he has a lot of tape. He was a 4-year starter. He can throw the ball like a mile. He's got an extremely strong arm. But with him, it's the inconsistency in terms of being accurate. But he had a really good Senior Bowl. He was the MVP of the Senior Bowl, and I went back and I watched his throws in that game, and he was anticipating throws. He was throwing with touch. So to me, there's a high ceiling with Mond, but he may just be a little bit raw right now.
Okay, perfect. And you've got one other quarterback that you mentioned.
Yeah. So the other guy is a kid by the name of Brady Davis out of Illinois State. So he played in the same league as Lance did. He didn't have a 2020 season. So he was a starter for Illinois State in 2018 and in 2019. Originally, he was at Memphis for 3 years. So he actually was granted a 6th year of eligibility in 2021 that he bypassed. But he's a guy to me who, I mean, and, I'm going to say this, but he doesn't have the arm strength of a Matthew Stafford, but that's how he plays. He plays like Stafford in terms of the confidence that he has in himself to be able to make any throw on the field. He's got a live arm. It's not an elite arm, but it's a live arm, sort of like Zach Wilson's. And he's got a very, very naturally quick release. And he can throw with touch to all levels. So from an arm talent perspective, he's a guy who I think could surprise people in terms of making a roster this year, maybe be a late round pick.
Very interesting. I've appreciated a lot of this analysis. I know that you've got a busy schedule. We draft season. I'm sure you've got a lot of other commitments in terms of guys trying to get you on their shows. I want to hear a little bit about kind of like your top receivers, both in the NFL, just a couple guys, and then in the draft class. How do you rank some of the top guys?
Sure. Yeah. So in the class, I've watched, I haven't watched everybody, but I really like Jamar Chase, as do a lot of other people. But I think that Chase is, we talk about Lance being that natural athlete at the quarterback spot. Well, Chase is that, obviously he's like athletic. He runs a 4.40, but it's those natural athletic instincts that just are off the charts with him in terms of how he sets up his routes, how he can have a sense for like timing and spacing of the passing game. Like it's almost like an NFL veteran at LSU a couple years back. So there's the natural athleticism with Chase, and then there's obviously the playmaking skills in terms of breakaway speed, ability to go up for the jump ball, and then just hands are off the charts. So I think he's the number one receiver for me, even though he didn't even play last year. So he would be one. I really like Smith out of Alabama too. Obviously, with Jaden Waddle, but I like Smith a little bit more than him for some of the same reasons that I like Chase for. Is his natural sense for spacing and hands and those things. So
yeah, I think that's really well said. Chase is an interesting one because I think 15 years ago that guy's a running back, but that guy, because he's built. This is a guy. This has to be a guy who's like a 350-pound clean guy or higher. This guy is different in terms of hip explosion, all that stuff. It's just so interesting seeing that receiver because he looks kind of small, but it's really compact. And he's 6 foot and 3/8 of an inch, and he's over
right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not small. Like he's not, like you said, he has a lot of that pack. Have you watched any of Kadarius Toney out of Florida?
Yes,
at all?
I've watched Toney. Toney, I think, is a boom bust guy because that guy figures out how to run routes well and kind of like get lined up in the right spot. And the only questions you have with him are he was used as a gadget player really until his senior year. The high-end players from that guy are up there with any player in the class.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought too about him. Like I really liked his tape, but like you said, he was a gadget player for 3 years.
Yeah.
So
Bateman's the guy that I find very interesting because I think Bateman he's a player with 33-inch arms. We all thought he was going to be about 6'2", and he's shorter than that. He's about the same size as Jamar Chase height-wise, but he's got ridiculously long arms. He retracts the ball really well. He is also probably the best player in terms of something what I call ESP, which is like extrasensory perception. Okay. It's a trait that I think functions in terms of like your overall vision, your feel when you have your back to defenders. how you're navigating like the overall landscape. It kind of like CeeDee Lamb was a player that I think was very, very high in this trade. AJ Brown was one of these players. And I have a high degree of trust in terms of maybe you won't be the number one player. Like I think that players with this trade, I think, can be better than would seem on the surface. And so Bateman, I think, is an interesting player like that. I've got Waddle at 1, almost based off of potential usage. In terms of like a speed guy, in terms of it's a little theoretical because I think Chase and Smith are going to put up better numbers. But I think Waddle is, if you're looking for the speed guy, which you probably need one of them in your offense if you're going to create an explosive offense that isn't based entirely off of efficiency, I think he's a better player than Ruggs. I think if you're going to take a stab at one of these types of players, he's a ball winner. He's tough. The only things you worry about are injury. And then a little bit of things like we didn't see a ton of them against press coverage. Chase, I think, is the safest receiver in the class. Chase is, top 6 player for me. I think he's really good. And Smith, I was going to put at a little lower. And every time I keep watching this guy, he's just a player, man. He just reels you in. And he's so skilled. I don't care if he's 170 pounds. Like, this is a top 10 player in the class.
Right.
So,
right. Exactly.
Like, don't overthink it with Smith. If he fails, it's not because of what we currently see on tape. But Bryan, thank you so much for coming on. I'll send you this so you can check it out before. I might retweet it or something like that.
Sure.
Give you a little tag and everyone go check out his publication, his Quarterback Film Room publication. How long have you been doing that, by the way? Is there any way to buy some previous publications? It's only $6.55. You can get it for what you would get it, like Dunkin' Donuts or whatever you're getting.
Right.
You guys might not have out there in Minnesota. You guys have some
actually
Dunkins?
we have a few Dunkins out here.
Okay. Because we can't drive.
They just
10
came
minutes. Yeah, we can't drive 5-10 minutes without one here. That's what New England's like. But
right.
So you've been doing these for a couple of years, changing how you do it a little bit. But I looked at this and that was kind of how I decided, like, gotta have him on the show. We gotta have some real quarterback talk, not just the typical narratives that you hear over and over and again. From someone who's played the position.
I really appreciate you having me on, Andrew. It was great. And then with the I've been writing my draft guide since 2017. So this would be year 5. And it's pretty in depth. It's all based on film and my knowledge of the position, and it's something I take a lot of pride in every single year. So it's a labor of love, and you can find it at the QB Film Room store. So it's qbfilmroom.sells, as in S as in Sam, ELZ, as in zebra.com /item/2021 draft guide, or if that's too much, just head to my Twitter handle at QB Film, and it's posted there.
And we'll link it in the video description, and that might be the easiest way to do that. But thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on. It's been a real pleasure. I'll let you get back to some more film. I'm sure you've got a couple other radio hits that you got to do, some podcasts you got to get on. But hey, happy draft season. It's always good to kind of get to the end of this, as I've been doing this a couple of years.
It's a fun time of the year, man.
It's fun. It's really fun.
It's really fun, and it's only one day away. It doesn't even seem real. So.
For betting, would you recommend Lance at 3, or do you think it's going to be Mac? For the odds?
So the odds right now on Lance, as of right now, I believe they're still plus 300. Okay, I would feel strongly about laying some money on for Lance at 3 right now. I would.